Good afternoon, David here. I hope you're well. It's another lovely autumn day. So today I'm going to go for a little bit of Czech Nymphing on one of my local streams. So what is Czech Nymphing? Well, Czech Nymphing, Czech as in Czech Republic, and a Czech nymph is a big heavy fly normally tied to imitate a caddis larva or a freshwater shrimp. So the whole point of Czech Nymphing is to get your flies deep to the feeding zone near the stream bed, and quite often we'd use 3 flies, one on the point and then have 2 droppers tied on, each with another fly tied on, and 3 times the weight means those flies are going to sink. I haven't got time for that today because I've only got an hour on the river, so I've just got a single fly tied on the end, and then I've pinched on a split shot, and this will give me the extra weight I need to get that Czech nymph down to that feeding zone. In terms of setup today, not using a special Czech nymph outfit, I've just got my standard river setup, a 9-foot 4-weight rod. It's a weight forward line. I've got 8 or 9 feet of straight through leader off the spool of around 6 pounds breaking strain, and then the Czech nymph and the split shot on the end. Just one last note about my setup today. On the end of my line I have a high-vis braided connector, and this is going to act as my strike indicator. So I'm going to grease this up with some mousseline grease, this stuff, so it floats nice and high in the water, and if it stops, if it dips under, if it jabs away, I'll strike and hopefully be into a fish. This is the Czech nymph I'm going to be using today, one of my all-time favourites, the Czech tan bug. It does a brilliant impression of both the freshwater shrimp and the caddisfly larva. It's tied with some good turns of heavy wire on the hook shank before the fly is dressed to make sure it sinks nice and deep. Here's a classic back eddy to start off with. Now, I'm not expecting any fish in the eddy itself, which is the area where all the foam and the scum's on the water, but I want to fish the seam of the eddy as the current meets that slack water, because fish will be able to sit in the slack water of the eddy and they'll intercept food in the current as it runs past them. And after a few runs down the side of the back eddy, the braided loop ducked away under the water, and we're into our first grayling of the session. Anybody who watched my previous video, Upstream Nymphing with Killer Bugs, may recognise this section of river. It's a deep channel that runs right next to a factory wall, and I'm Czech nymphing down the deep water and got into several grayling from this position without moving. There was a shoal of fish at the back end of the channel. There's a few key points with Czech nymphing that are important to remember. Firstly, hardly any fly line out the tip of the rod, only 2 or 3 feet of fly line. Secondly, we only really want the last 2 or 3 inches of line on the water, just in my case where the braided connector is, and this stops any drag, stops the flies being brought up in the water. And thirdly, making sure that the rod tip is slightly in front of that braided connector as the flies come downstream. We almost think we're leading the flies down, and again that stops any drag and allows those flies to sink down deep to get into that feeding zone where this shoal of grayling are lying. A very enjoyable session then on the grayling, plenty of fish coming out to the Czech nymph. If there was one key thing I think about this session that made it so successful, it would have been that split shot that was on the leader 6 inches above the fly. It just gave me that weight to get this Czech nymph down to the feeding zone. It's a deep channel next to this wall, and without it I don't think that fly would have got down to the fish as well, and I wouldn't have caught as many. If you want to buy any of the flies featured in this video, it's shop.peaksflyfishing.com, or for more information about our fly fishing coaching, it's www.peaksflyfishing.com. Thank you. Bye bye.